cybersecurity? There's a ton of content out there, and if you don't know where to start, it can be overwhelming, even paralyzing. So let's fix that. Welcome to Simply Cyber, a community of tens of thousands of aspiring and active cybersecurity professionals focused on networking, knowledge sharing, and professional development. I'm Dr. Gerald Ozier, Chief Content Creator at Simply Cyber, inviting you to get the answers to your cybersecurity problems with hundreds of cybersecurity videos answering your frequently asked questions, interviewing industry experts, and live streaming daily cyber threat briefings hosted by me. Now get the stories and insights you won't find anywhere else. Hit subscribe now and dig into all the fresh content on the channel and in the community. Nothing should stop you from launching and leveling up your cybersecurity career today. All right, everybody, welcome to the workshop. I love NIST with Jack Scott. This is the final training of an amazing week. The Simply Cyber Con has been crushing it, and we have saved the best for last. Believe that. Jax has been dealing with a little bit of technical difficulty that we've been working through. We're going to give it a shot, but I will promise you this. In the next 40 minutes, you will get educated on NIST cybersecurity framework, how to implement it, tools, techniques, options. We have contingency plans for days, people. All right, I'm going to try to bring Jack Scott onto stream. Jax, are you ready? Give me a thumbs up. All right, here we go. A sideways thumb. Okay, here we go. Hi, Jax. How are you?
Hey, can you guys hear and see me?
I can see you. I can hear you. A little choppy, little pixelated, but we're not going to let that ruin anything. Jax, I can run your slides and I can run your, I'm going to put on a sequin outfit, and you know, just dance on the side, and I will be presenting whatever it is Ms. Jax wants. If you have any questions, guys, you know, the community is all about good times. So drop them in chat. We're keeping an eye out for you, and we love it. So Jax, please take it away.
Awesome. Yeah. If you can do me a favor and just bring up the Black Doodle Group Project PowerPoint, but don't share the screen just yet. All
right.
All right.
I'm gonna hide down here. Like this is where the assistant tray is.
Perfect. Wearing my favorite I Love NIST shirt. It's been a little chaotic on the back end, y'all. Thanks for hanging in there with us. I even tried an additional laptop. I think what happened is my Mac decided to run a new update last night, and I think it's just freaking out. So nothing's working on this end, but we're going to make this happen. You guys are the best. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about a topic I love, NIST, but we're going to dive deep into the CSF framework. So I'm going to provide to you, and this is going to go an hour. So we're going to go a little after 10 due to us starting late. So it's a lot of information. I am going to keep it high level because this could go on for literally days talking about NIST and frameworks. But what my goal is the takeaways that you are all going to achieve from this class. And something that I had a learning curve when I got into GRC is I did not know how to work with work papers. I didn't know how to manipulate work papers. I didn't know how to customize them for clients. So I want to provide you those tips and tricks. So at the end of this, I'm going to empower you enough that you will be able to take the CSF and go into an environment confidently and be able to do a baseline cybersecurity assessment. So that is my goal for today. If you can do me a favor, and I'm glad that Jerry's here because he can help me monitor the chat. If you do have questions, put a capital Q in the front. It'll just help us to see them. And I do intend to try to tackle all of the questions that go through, but we also have a lot of content. So just keep that in mind. If I miss your question, throw it back in the chat again, spam us. So if you would, Jerry, if you would go ahead and share the screen. And I would love to do questions in real time. Again, content is really important here. So I'm going to try to answer the questions as we go through it. So just be patient with me. All right. If you'll go to the next one. So many of you should know who I am, and don't mind if things are off kilter a little bit. This was actually supposed to be shared in a different platform. So it's a little off, but that's okay. I am Jax. I am a full-time cybersecurity manager and consultant. I also run Outpost Gray for many of you that know that YouTube channel. On top of that, I have a podcast called Two Cyber Chicks with Erica McDuffie. And then I have a background in the military, special ops. I joined in 2004, started IT in 2008. So I've been doing either IT, cyber threat intel, and now GRC for that since 2008. Co-authored a book with Jerry, so go us. And then just finished my master's in cybersecurity risk management. And as you can see, I love cats and hiking. So that's a little bit about me. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, so NIST, cybersecurity framework. So I can tell you, unless you're like me, these frameworks are not that thrilling to just read. Many people make jokes of like reading it to go to sleep. I like them. They can sometimes be a little challenging to understand. We won't be able to go into obviously all of the frameworks, but my goal today is to get you excited about NIST and get you more curious about NIST and what it is specifically within cybersecurity, because NIST covers a lot of areas, not just cybersecurity. And we've got a question that came in. Thank you, Jerry. So, is NIST CSF ideal for local small businesses, or should I look at different frameworks to help them start establishing cybersec posture? I think that CSF is ideal for small businesses, and I'll be talking to you about why CSF is so ideal a lot of times. Because another thing, if you go to the next slide, actually, I think we cover a little bit of this. No, it's not this one, but hold there. These are some resources for you all to grab, take a screenshot. I'm also going to share this presentation out with you all. If Jerry, you should have the Simply CyberCon folder. If you want to share that PDF version, that's above the one that you're sharing right now, to the community, that would be amazing. So they have these resources. And this breaks down various different frameworks that you can use. I think the bottom left one, CSF, is great for small businesses and even large. But if you're doing different size companies, a lot of organizations will tend to lean towards that top left one, which is 853. It is the, like, I would call it the Bible for NIST frameworks. And CSF actually derives a lot of the controls from, I can't say all of them, but I want to say all of them, probably all of them, from 853. So just keep that in mind. A lot of the controls that you see within NIST, they do have overlap within 853. So great resources. Again, this is not all inclusive that we have here. These are just the ones that I use the most often. So I wanted to provide it to you all. All right. If you would go to the next one, Jerry. All right. So NIST CSF. If you're in this space, you know that we've come out with a new version, 2.0. However, it's not been formalized and it'll be coming out next year. So I didn't want to teach on it. The photo on the right-hand side, if you remove that center part called governance or govern, that would be, and that is the current NIST CSF 1.0. The 2.0 will have that sixth category called govern or governance in that center portion. So I wanted to highlight that for you all. But what we're going to be covering today is that external circle that you see there. And we'll be covering identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So there's 5 categories within 1.0. It is a non-compliance mandatory, non-mandatory framework. What that means is you have certain frameworks. We'll use PCI. That's a very familiar one for credit card information, or like HIPAA frameworks. Those are mandatory compliance frameworks that organizations need to follow to be compliant within their environment. CSF, why it was so unique and why it is so unique and why it was designed, is to allow organizations to have a framework that it creates, that allows them to utilize and can create a baseline within their environment. And like I mentioned, this framework does integrate NIST 853 controls. And the intent is allow organizations, like the question earlier, small businesses that maybe don't have a robust group of individuals in cybersecurity to do a very really in-depth assessment. They can use this to get in and understand what their baseline is. And I'll explain to you what a baseline is and how we figure that out. All right, if you can go to the next slide, Jerry. Awesome. So finding a baseline version 1.0. So getting you familiar with this really quick before we dive in. So understanding subcategories is really important. With this framework, you are going to have, so you've got your 5 categories, right? You just saw that on the last slide. Now you have 23 categories, or you have your not categories, 5 categories, then the subcategories. I forget. No, what are the 5? It's not categories. It's 5 areas. We'll just come, you got your 5 areas, you got your 23 categories, and then
Capabilities.
Thank you. And then you have 108 subcategories. Okay, that's important because when we open up the work paper, you're going to see how it's laid out, and that is how it's going to be laid out. So you've got the 23 categories, 108 subcategories. The subcategories, and this is we're talking about CSF, but I want you to take away, this is very typical for NIST frameworks across the board when you're working in this space to understand this. And understanding those subcategories is where you're actually getting into the deepest level and really starting to customize and understand your environment and understand that control. Let's see. Yeah. Is NIST comprehensive enough that if I became a guru, I don't need to know any other frameworks? Well, I think yes, I love NIST. However, now I will be very honest with you. I don't know other frameworks like I do NIST, but I promise you that if I had to sit with a client and do an ISO assessment or a SOC 2, I have friends that know it well enough, but a lot of these frameworks are very similar in nature. I think I would be just fine navigating it. There would probably be some like context and how they present the data a little differently, but generally frameworks are very similar. They're just presented a little bit differently. So if you understand how NIST is done and you get really, really good at it, because you're not going to be you're not going to be able to be an expert in every single framework. So I would encourage you, pick a framework, stick to it, and then you'll be able to take those skills and those knowledge to other frameworks. I don't know what you're sharing right now, Jerry, but it's on the screen. Cool, thanks. Okay, so that was a great question. Thank you. So second piece here. Oh, you're all good. Determining scoring. So we'll talk about why this is important, but I wanted to provide you a high level understanding of scoring. Typically what you will see, and this can be customized to you, but typically what you see is a score between 1 and 5. And there's different scoring methodologies. Again, I want to emphasize that you can customize this however you want. If you wanted a 1 through 10, go do awesome things. 1 through 5 is pretty standard. And what 1 through 5 typically is that organization, if they're a 1, nothing is being done. So they don't have any formalized processes or procedures in place. And you'll see this probably with like nonprofits, for example, because cybersecurity isn't a priority for them. Getting money generated, completing their mission is. So this is pretty normal actually to see. 2, and you'll see this more common. I see it a lot. I see actually 2 a lot of times in like federal agencies you think would have a more mature environment. There are 2. So they're sort of getting things done, but it's mostly done ad hoc. So what that means is like they have an incident response and they can communicate to you what that incident response procedure looks like, but they don't have it documented anywhere. And when you ask them about it, they go, well, Joe's been here for 15 years. And so if something like that happened, he communicates to Bob and then Bob communicates to Jerry and it all gets done. And that you'll see that a lot of times in an environment. So there's a lot of 2s out there. 3 is it's getting done, but not completely formalized or consistent. So maybe they have some policies out there, but maybe they don't have the refined procedures, or maybe the procedures are there, the policies aren't there. Maybe the procedures are there, but they haven't been updated in like 5 or 10 years. And that's a true story. You'll see that too. And 4 is policies and procedures are in place. Everything is effectively working. And I haven't seen a 4. So if you guys have seen a 4, let me know. But typically 4s and even 5s, top notches are going to be something like Raytheon's, organizations that have, a robust cybersecurity team that can actually really focus in on this, because this is a full-time job to keep your policies and procedures updated to make sure that your set controls are effective within the environment. So just keep that in mind. Typically what you'll see when you're doing these scores, 1 to 3s. 3s are like, that's pretty good. When I did my most recent CSF, they may have had a couple of 3s, but there were not a lot out of the 108 subcategories, to give you an idea. All right, so determining the self-assessment. So if you know your environment well, you may be able to get the self-assessment done in an hour, like boom. And that's no joke, but that is like, you've been there for, 10 years. You can sit down, you can knock it out. Does that typically happen? I haven't seen that. Usually you bring in experts like me who don't know your environment, which requires a plethora of what we call of interviews, where you actually sit down with stakeholders, you get the CSF framework, you go through those sub-controls and you create questions around those sub-controls to identify and understand their environment, even asking for what we call as artifacts. So that can take up to, depending the size of the environment, between 1 to 3 months. Like this can be and is a very robust process, because you have got to become intimately familiar with that environment. So as a GRC consultant going in, just keep that in mind. This is not something you're just going to plop down and immediately knock out within a month unless you have a very, very robust team. And on top of it, a team that's done a CSF. I had a team of 5 people. It took us 3 months because none of them had done a CSF. Even though they had done other assessments, the CSF was different enough that they needed to get familiar with those controls. So just keep that in mind. Just because you've done an A123 assessment doesn't mean you're going to be able to sit right down and knock this out like that. So there is a little bit of a learning curve. And then the data from this goes into that future state roadmap. And I'll talk about those tier projections and what that means. But you want to make sure when you're collecting this data and determining that self-assessment for the organization, that you're collecting meeting minutes that, and I'll show you on the work papers how I have typically collected this data to keep it all centralized. So I'm going to teach you how to actually make a work paper operational for you. All right, if you'll go to the next slide, please. All right, so next, here we go. Some hands-on action, y'all. So how to find, read, and use a NIST work paper. I want to like show of hands, like if you guys got the emoji hands in chat, of how many people have either gotten into a GRC position and then they're like, how do I even read this work paper? You know what I mean? Or have you ever wondered, you've opened the work papers, you've opened the Excel documents, you're like, how do you read this thing? How do you figure this out? Because it's very, very robust. Very curious of individuals, especially I know for me, the first time I saw a work paper was at my first consulting job, not in my college degree, and it completely blew my mind. All right, if you'll go to the next slide for me. So we are going to work through this. So first off, scoring methodology. We are going, hold on, let me make sure I'm going to pull the presentation up on my end really quick and make sure I have the order correct over here. Dun, dun, dun. Oh, okay. I need to send you a link really quick. So let me drop a link in our chat. You guys bear with me because this is actually going to take us somewhere, but it didn't show up in the PowerPoint presentation, but that's okay because we're working through this and you guys are being a fantastic group. So, all right, boom. All right, so we're not going to talk about scoring methodology. We're actually going to go to this link that I just provided to Jerry. Boom. So we're going to talk about how to find and read a NIST work paper, specifically CSF. So this is NIST. I'll actually drop this link in the chat for everyone over here so you guys can have it and you can float around. I would encourage you go through this and just get familiar with this website in general because this is a couple of clicks in, I think. So if you look, most of NIST websites are laid out the exact same as far as cybersecurity. I can't tell you about like the other industry areas that they cover, but usually on the left-hand side, you're going to have like a get started, example, framework profile, some perspective, some general ask questions, things like that. And then the right side will provide you like additional links. And then I'm actually going to send you another link, NIST CSF. Let me send you one more because I think this would also be helpful. So I'm going to drop this link in private chat for you. Boom. If you'll bring that up. And then we're going to go back to the framework documents, Jerry. So thank you. So let me take a step back for you guys, because this is a couple of steps in. And if this was new to me, it might confuse me. So taking a couple of steps back and looking at the regular NIST, we'll call it the landing page. Okay. So this is the landing page for NIST CSF. They do a great job at providing you like a bottom line up front. Here is what it is. You'll see right here, just released. It's the draft version of 2.0. Hopefully after some more reviews and some more revisions, we're probably likely going to see that published next year. We're going to see. So go ahead and scroll down a little bit. What this provides you all, if you'll see right here, I showed you that graphic earlier. This shows you, and it's core. Yep. So you've got all the frameworks on the left-hand side. So those are like identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. You've got your cores, your tiers, your profiles. I told you we would talk about tiers and what that means. And then any online learning that you need. I did all the online learning. I didn't think it was super beneficial. I think this class is actually going to be better because they don't even dive into like the framework, the actual work papers. They just talk about high level of the purpose of CSF. So if you've got the time, check it out. And then if you scroll down a little bit more, these are just any late updates of being able to like reference or see any of the changes. Also a great resource. You can kind of see where they've derived information from. Journey to NIST. So you see right there, September 19th through 20. That's pretty recent. May want to check that out. So great resource section. Okay. So from there, we're actually going to get to where you were with the other links. So if you go to the top left, actually go back to the other link because I want to show them how we get there. Yep. So scroll up to the top. So let's pause here. So let's say you're brand new and you're about to do an assessment in an environment and you're like, how the heck do I get the work paper? Typically, you can find it on the top left. There'll be a tab called framework. So if you click on that plus sign called framework, perfect. And then what'll open up here are various different options for you to be able to download. Typically, what I have used, not everybody, but what I've used is I use the framework version 1.0 core Excel document. So if you'll click on that, there's other versions. This is the best. This is the one I've seen most people use. It's easy to manipulate. And this is what work papers are in. So we'll go ahead and open this. And then from there, I'm going to teach you how to get this manipulated. So if you'll zoom in a little bit or a lot. Wonderful. Okay, perfect. Now, awesome. And now we're going to go down it very slowly, not all the way down, but I want to show you far left function. So it is called function. So that's what they call the detect, respond, recover. So you got
I messed up. I'm sorry, Jax. I
fine.
called it capability.
I couldn't remember it either, but it's because other ones are called different things. So function, just remember that there's 5 functions. Then if you remember the categories, 23 categories, they're right there. So those are the big areas. So right here we have, and you guys should know, asset management. So we've got asset management, which is IDAM. Okay. And then from there, you've got a subcategory, which is there's 108 of these. That's where it goes into those deep layers of understanding their environment. So when you see the control number right there, where it's IDAMI, that's identify is the ID, the AM is asset management, and the 1 is that first control underneath that category. So that's when you see those numbers, and that's when you see tracking. So whenever you see, if I saw IDAM1, then I would be able to go back to CSF and be able to reference where this was. Now, how do you dig deeper? Say you're a new analyst, say you're a new GRC analyst in here, you're about to do this control, you're about to assess it. Well, there's no information on here, is there? It just tells you it just tells you policy devices and systems within the organization are inventoried. Let me pull it up on my side because I cannot see it very well on your side. Hold on, bring it up.
I'll zoom in more.
Yeah, that would be great.
We have the capability.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is awesome. Okay, so I love this stuff. Nerds for life. Okay, so I'm looking at this. I'm a new analyst. I'm like, all right, so physical devices systems when the organization are inventory. But what does that mean? So then you look on the informative references on the right-hand side. This is where you can look at and pick a framework that is most comfortable for you, which is great about CSF because you can use COBIT, you can use ISA, you can use ISO. You have all of these options. I am going to use NIST SP 853 Rev 4. I know there is a Rev 5 out there. That is why they have created the CSF 2.0 to fall in place of Rev 5, but this is Rev 4. So then what we would do here is, let me send this to you, or Jerry, you want to Google, just do a copy and paste for that. Yeah. Cool. He's going to copy and paste that Rev 4 in there so we can get to, and I'm going to show you what CM8 is and PM5 is. And if you see on here, this one has been withdrawn because it is superseded now by Rev 5, just to keep that in mind. You will see stuff like this all the time in NIST when there's a replacement of a new framework. So when you're in here, how to get to this actual framework, you click on that publication link at the top right. Boom. And then we're going to bring this up. Typically, when I'm in here and I need to search something really quickly, I know that you can search by doing go Control F. And this is literally what I do, guys, because I don't know all the frameworks. So I'll go Control F. I'll do CMM with no space, CMM-8, no space. because sometimes I don't know what the label is, and then I'll just keep going through. And now, boom, right there, control name. Now I know it's information systems component inventory. So what I do here is I will copy that control name, information systems control component inventory. I control F, I add that, I control F that, because that's going to typically take me right to the area that it's at, because now there's only 11. Go a couple times. Wow, that's a lot. Yeah, there'll be a section right here. Boom. Now we're at CM8. So now what I can do is from here, I will start just reading through this. So the controls at the organizational level, what does this mean? Develops and documents an inventory of information system components that. And then now this is where, when you're going through their environment, you want to make sure when you do the inventory, you'll do an initial assessment of their inventory of what they have in their environment. But say you're doing an interview, what you want to do is come prepared. So you want to check what they currently have. You want to see, are they accurately reflects the current information systems? Do they even have an information systems components list? If they don't, then you're going to, you would bring that up in the interview. And I'm going to, okay, thank you, Jerry. I'll get through 2, 3, and 4, and then I'm going to take questions for a couple of seconds. Thank you. I just had my front door fixed, you guys. So, that's how you build. If you've ever wondered, where do I get the questions? How do I do these interviews? This is money right here. This is how you do it. You go through here, you start reading and understanding what the control is, and then you're able to then ask the question. So I will pause there and take any questions that are coming in right now. All right, what do we got here? Is there any reason you would not default to Rev 5? This is the reason. And the only reason is that right now, CSF 1.0, since it's the active CSF and 2.0 has not been approved and it's aligned to Rev 4, it would just makes my life easier to go directly to Rev 4. Now, I can tell you that Rev 5 and Rev 4, there are going to be similarities. I guarantee this control is probably over there and it's probably mapped directly to CM8. But there's going to be certain controls within CSF 1.0 that are not directly mapped. There's going to be a little bit of differentiation. And I'm lazy. I don't have a lot of time. So trying to figure that out just to get to Rev 5. Again, this is not a compliance. Remember, this is not a compliance required framework. So I think that the recent compliance has just shifted either at the end of this year or sometime this year for organizations to be at Rev 5. I know for USPTO, they don't have to change till January 2024, so they can still use Rev 4. I hope that answers your questions on that. So that also is environmentally, it's environment dependent as well on that. Is CSF a step to get into NIST 853.5? CSF is self-contained for smaller companies. Old guys, 800 is the king. Oh, are you talking about a step to get into it's another form of doing a NIST 853 Rev 5 assessment is using CSF? I think that's what you're asking. And I think that's an accurate statement because there is overlap with that within the CSF and 853, and it will be Rev 5 as well when CSF 2.0 comes out. So that, yes, I could see that.
Can I comment on that question?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
All right. So what I would say, Professor Black Ops, is that you should think of CSF as a framework to implement 853, where 853 is basically just a dictionary of controls. Think of 853 as all the controls that you could possibly have. It doesn't say which ones you're supposed to use and not use. CSF is just an approach to choose the right controls out of 53 that would be appropriate for different organizations at different levels of maturity. So don't think of it as CSF as 853 light. Think of CSFs is an implementation plan that borrows from the controls in 53 to inform what controls are in your CSF implementation.
That's awesome. No, that was great. I think that was perfect. You said that a lot better than me. I'm going to actually, okay, so I just uploaded a framework, CSF framework into that share folder. Will you open that? I'm going to try something. I'm going to see if I can change and update things in real time as you're sharing. Yep. That should work. Okay. Is that the one that I shared in the? Yeah, it is. Okay, cool. So Perfect. So, all right, everyone, stay with me on this. If you start to get lost, let me know. So, all right, we're putting GRC consultant hat on. We're in the environment. We just went to NIST 853 Rev 4. We just looked at the control and we're like, okay, now we need to ask the client questions. So we've got this work paper, right? And it's not really, what are we going to do? Are we going to and this is this typical thing. What are you going to do? Are you going to write the question somewhere else? So I'm going to show you how to make this work paper operational for you. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to try to add a column and see if this works with, yes. Okay. You might have to scan out just a tad so you can see this. So I'm going to show you what I would do in this environment to prepare myself to start going through this assessment now. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to make a column in this area. I'm just rolling with this, you all. I'm just pretending this is a new environment. So this can be customized differently, whatever. So let's just say I'm going to use my state and local clients. So we got our categories, subcategories. We'll say current environment, and then we're going to do a left, another one here. So we'll do artifacts. Okay. So I would probably merge all these together to make it a little prettier. Boom. All right. So then I would say currently, don't want to put the client's name. Client does not have formalized process in place to track current devices and systems within their environment. Their CIO, and this is true story, their CIO maintains a tracker on his own computer that is not shared with is not communicated with other stakeholders. And then I would say the data was last verified on, 10/1/2023. The CIO stated he conducts monthly checks of the assets, but is not certain that everything is listed on the document. This could be really built out. This may even be bigger than this, you guys. So you're building this out because you want to get a snapshot of the picture of their environment. And then what you do when you say you don't get this information before the interviews, you would collect this during the interviews one way or another, but you're really building out that current environment. From there, over here is where you would put any artifacts that you would receive from either the interview, the CIO. So if you'll shift over to the right just a little bit, Jerry, yep, artifacts. So in here would be Excel document, labeled, and make this as detailed as you can, not as you want to. Because remember, you may not be the only one on this work paper. You want others to know what really detailed so they can pick it up if you get hit by a Mack truck or you leave the company or something. So Excel document labeled, client name, assets, and inventory. And then maybe there was policies are outdated. Last update was 2021. I don't want to deep dive too much into this. So those are the two things. Why you need to know this is because you're going to take the data that's here and here, and you're going to create something that's called a gap analysis. So we're not going to dive too deeply into that. I wish I had a plethora of time, but so you're going to go through all of this just like this, over all the way down as much as you can. Another thing to note is when you're going through this, you need to figure out a scoring methodology too, which we're going to talk about next. And I'm going to have Jerry kind of go back to the other slide. But first, I want to pause here because I'm going to stop talking about how to make work papers operational and how to do like interviews and collect the data. And then we're going to kind of go back to like scoring and understanding how to take this data and numerically value it so you can provide the client with a baseline score. So that's why we're doing all of this right now. So before we do this, yes, jump in, Jerry, please. Key aspect. I'd love it. I love your insights.
All right. Hey, really quickly, I just want to share one quick thing. Jax, just so you know, chat is loving this. People are absolutely eating this up. Seeing it practically done is huge. Shout out to Erica McDuffie, who's in chat right now. Erica McDuffie, other co-host of Two Cyber Chicks. Definitely check out that podcast. So one thing that Jax has just done, and I want to show it to you, is she's filling out this spreadsheet. IDAM1 is what we just talked about. She's captured the current environment, and she's got the artifacts. And the NIST 853 CM8 was the control that she was talking about, okay? Just to level set what we're all talking about, okay? And this is that control. Now, here's one thing that's vitally important, okay? And if you've been doing NIST audit and GRC for a while, like you just, I don't want to say take it for granted, but you don't think about it. You absolutely need to look at what these things are, because you're going to sit in an interview and you're going to ask those people, hey, how are you doing information system component inventory? If you ask that question, now Jax in her capturing, she says, oh, the CIO, he does it he maintains it in a spreadsheet. It's a real janky process. That's fine. But if Jax sits down with the CIO and says, hello, CIO, I would like you to explain to me, do you develop and document an inventory of information system components that accurately reflect the current information system, include components with authorization boundary of information system? If you have that conversation with the CIO is literally going to look at you and be like, what in the hell are you saying right now? I do not understand you. Yeah. This is a vital point. You need to understand what the control is actually asking and break it into normal English speak or whatever your language is. And you need to be able to communicate to the business what you're actually asking them. Jax, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but I can't tell you how cringe it is when a junior person reads the NIST control verbatim in an interview and the person says, what are you saying? And then they can't answer that question. It derails the whole thing. It shoots your credibility. It's a nightmare. You don't want to live that nightmare. So sorry to jump in on your stream, Jax, but it's so vitally important to be able to communicate effectively what you're actually asking so you can get that information and then put it in the spreadsheet. Thank you.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I can honestly tell you, I've witnessed it firsthand, 2 different clients, same, just exactly like to a T. It was like you were in that interview, Jerry. Like I think it's just standard. You don't know better as a young GRC analyst and you start reading. I will tell you the hack for that is to give them an example, shorten the question, give them an example of what you're looking for. And that can be for this is like, hey, do you read a little bit of the NIST control? And then just say what this means is, do you track your assets? Do you track X, Y, and Z within the asset inventory spreadsheet? And then they will be able to answer you. But I see it all the time, Jerry, all the time.
Yeah. And just like one other thing, again, sorry, Jax, I'm such a control freak. Like, because it says A, 1, 2, 3, 4, B, this does not mean that you have 5 questions to ask. Okay. Don't treat this as a punch list. What you should do is look at this. All it's saying is, do you have an inventory? Like, do you do inventory management and configuration management of that inventory? So say a question like, hey, like when you're adding or removing systems from the environment, what does that look like? Do you have a process? Do people approve it before they do it? Is there change control? Like talk me through the process of adding a new system to the environment. And then when they tell you that, all of these questions will come up as answers. And if they don't, you can say, okay, so it sounds like you're not doing any tracking. Is that a fair statement? Yeah, no, we don't really track it. I have it on a spreadsheet, but who knows, right? And this is how you identify the gaps without coming across as like some, brutish auditor who's looking to get, get red X's all over the place. Okay, back to Jax. Sorry, Jax. Thank you.
I love it. No, keep it coming.
I'm just super passionate about this.
I love this stuff. Okay, so due to the sake of time, not having time to really deep dive into this, we're going to pivot back to the slide deck and we're going to talk about scoring now. So we've gotten one control that we assessed. So now what I'm going to do is talk to you about scoring, and then I'm going to show you a scoring spreadsheet, and then we're going to score that control. And hopefully you'll have the takeaway of understanding how to go forth and do more scoring. So the goal here is let's keep it simple. I have worked on projects where we have done risk divided by impact divided by this, and then you divide predisposing conditions and then you multiply by 4. It can get absolutely out of hand. CSF, keep it simple. Like I showed you earlier, 1 through 5 keeps it simple. Try to stick to integral ratings. What I mean by that is you can do 2.5. So maybe they're not a 3 just yet, but they're a little bit more than a 2 because they have the policies and procedures in place, but maybe a lot of them are outdated, like the majority of them. You might see that. So maybe they're a 2.5. Keep that in mind. And then use the spreadsheet that I was just showing you earlier to add the scoring. So build that into that work paper, or you can do it separately in a completely different, like separate work paper, however you want to do it. Don't be afraid though to customize the document how you want them. I know that says customer, but it's customizable. I think that's the other key here to learn is everything in this space can be very much customized, including the control itself, depending on what you're needing to do for that client. And then make sure to set a goal score. And I'll talk to you about what that is in this next one. So if you can bring up the Excel document I just shared with you, Jerry. Now, this is our friends at Expel. I thought this was a great tool. We built a different one for our client, but this is a great tool to be able to utilize. So they have an explanation at the top. All it does is tell you like how to use this. So if you'll click on down at the bottom, there's a tab for each of those areas. Click on identify. Perfect. So I've kind of filled this out beforehand just to kind of show you. So the top right here, to give you the high level first, and then we'll jump into all the scoring down below. That right there is with a score of a 4. So that's why you see the ring of a 4. So that is their future state goal that we want this client to be at. We want them at a 4. Anything that's in the center that's a blue is based on the scores that I will show you below and what they got within their set areas of like asset management, because this one's specifically for identify. So that's the tab that we're in. We're going through those functions right now. So these are all the subcategories, and it'll break it down and it'll show you how close they are with that circle to hitting that future goal. And this is I like this tool. It's really important because it helps the client see kind of where they're at in their future state. And you can see here, most of them are hitting at like 2s for the most part. So if you can scroll down now, Jerry, we'll go to the first one, asset management, which is IDAM1. So you see right here, that is the category of being physical devices and systems within the organization. Well, if you remember earlier, we talked to the CIO, and the CIO said that he has some, but it's a little bit clunky. So he is doing it, but it's not well communicated out. There's not policies and procedures in place for that. So then what we do is we think about the scoring that I told you about earlier. One is nothing's being done. Well, they're doing something, right? It's just maybe it's not formalized. So they're definitely not a 1. I would probably look at 2. Sort of getting done, right? They're sort of getting done, but it's mostly done ad hoc. He could probably be a 2, but then I would look at 3 really quick, the score, and be like, it's getting done, but not formalized and consistent. I would say they're not at a 3. They're more at a 2 because they're sort of getting done, but it's mostly done ad hoc. And I would probably, just because it's not formally communicated with leadership, I think if it was more formalized as far as communicated out, that spreadsheet the CIO had, I may put them at a 2.5, but I think they have room for growth. So we're going to put them at a 2. So if you scroll to the right, you will see where their as is score. So where are they currently today? They're at a 2, in my opinion. Could be a 2.5. Again, this will be like based on what you think. I think they're lower, but we want them to be at a 4. Like that is their future state goal. So and you see all of these are 4s. Well, some of these, especially like system control ones, they may not be able to get to 4s. They may only be able to get to 3s because maybe they don't have the money for a certain tool that's going to help them get to a 4. So think about that when you do these, because I know for us, our client was at, I think either at a 3, I think it was 3 or 3.5, just because they don't have the money and they don't have the people, the resources to be able to get to a 4. So it might be more realistic for them to be at a 3. I think most clients though could probably get to a 4 as far as that first control right there. So that's how you kind of understand like scoring. And as you go through the process, once you do that, you will go through. The first thing that you would do though is you fill out that work paper completely. And then what I would do is either add the scoring to that work paper or then go in here and then you go through and you create and you fill out the as is for each of these areas and clearing all of that up. Then that's going to give you your overall score there. And then
And that is a massive amount of work. The filling out the work paper is the job. That remember Jack just did that first one, IDAM one. CIO's got Excel spreadsheets. You got to do that for all 108 controls. So that's the work. All right.
I love that. Okay. So now that we've done that, what I want to show you is if you'll bring up the slide deck again, we are going to go now to the next slide and we're going to talk about determining the future state. Okay. This is really important because you just create a baseline for the client. Now we need to figure out how do we get to that future state. And that future state is based on a couple of different things. It's based on not only what you've identified within their environment, like going through those interviews, collecting the artifacts, providing them the scores. That's really important. But like I said earlier, they may not be able to get to a 4. So it's all about sitting down with them and then doing what we call the prioritization call. We actually went through. And so all of those, the work papers, everything that we identified, we went through that because in essence, depending on what score they received, that could have been their gap of not having like asset inventory, for an example. And so their gap is not being able to have oversight as far as their assets and the life cycle of those assets, things like that. So our goal, the future state, to get them to a 3 or a 4 would be to mitigate that gap. Okay. So the way to do that, if you'll bring up the work paper again, when we were tackling the controls. So what I would do here is, again, keeping it all in one location. You may want to put this somewhere else. It all depends on how you want to work. I like to have everything in one location. I will tell you something to consider, because you'll want to give these to the client, is you may consider, once you get this all done, is to create what we call as a client copy. That obviously depends on the time that you have. Do you have the resources to create another version of this and clean it up? Or do you want to just keep it clean and they're one and the same? The client copy and the team copy is the same. I've seen both ways, where the team is like, theirs is really messy, they have a lot of data, and then they just provide the client with like a current environment, artifacts, and then overall assessment. Just letting you know that. So what I would do here, I can control this. So I would add a column to the right of E right here. And then I would put gap analysis next to it to keep this super clean, keep everything in one place. I may even put my scoring in here. This is where I would merge these cells. And then for this, I would say assets are not inventoried on, or wait, like asset, like inventory is not formalized. And then maybe say, we'll have a recommendation slide for that. So I would say client does not have formalized policies and procedures. That would be another thing. Okay. Did they have policies? Oh, wait, no, they do. They're outdated. So clients are outdated. So I would say here, policies and procedures are outdated according to company policy of every, 1 year. Because sometimes companies will have a policy that their policies and procedures need to be updated yearly. And this one, as you can see, is about 2 years out of date. So adding that. So that's their gap analysis that we identified. And then I may even have a recommendation. And these recommendations would be to get them to the future state. So you've got their gaps. We have current environment artifacts, the gaps that we've identified, and then recommendations. So I would say recommendations here, again, thinking like, how do we get them to the future state to get them from the 2 to the 3? So remember, the 3 score is, I'll read it to you again. 3 score is it gets done, but not formalized and consistent. So right now they're sort of getting it done. So how do we get them to, let's say they're 4. We want to get them to 4, actually. Let's say we want to get them to 4 policies and procedures in place and effective. So our recommendation is establish a formalized asset inventory that is distributed, or whatever, to leadership on a monthly cadence. Then we can say inventory is like validated quarterly by the CIO and like, I don't know, cybersecurity lead. Oops. And then we could also say like policies and procedures are updated on a yearly basis. So if they did all of these things, and I'm trying to oversimplify this for you all, but if they did all of these things right here, establish a formalized asset inventory that is distributed to leadership on a monthly cadence, inventory is validated quarterly by the CIO and cybersecurity lead, and then policies and procedures are updated on a yearly basis. And maybe the distro goes out quarterly. Like, we would have to figure that out according to their policies and procedures that we would help them establish. If they did all of this, in my belief, if they did conquered and did all of that, we could get them into a 4 specifically for that control, which they would have policies and procedures in place, and they're effectively tackling and keeping up to date with their asset inventory. Does that make sense? And then so they're not at a 4 yet, but what we do is we're giving them a recommendation to get to a 4 based on the gap analysis. And then what we would do from this is we would create a roadmap, which we don't have time to go into, to help them, because we're their consultant. We're not going to just be like, all right, here's a recommendation, see you later. Instead, I would take this data and then I would put it into like one of those roadmap Microsoft planners or whatever they're called. I would develop this out based on these recommendations. I would put these into tasks, and then I would help the client get to that future state. That's why it's so important when you first get into a client's environment to ask them, and this is a great thing to write down if you're a new GRC consultant, when you get into an environment, one of the first things you need to ask for, depending on what you're doing for the client, if you're doing GRC, probably need to go, when was the last time you had an assessment? Can I see your report? Because you need to know when was the last time the assessment is done. Then you need to look at those. They should have gaps and recommendations in that report. And then you need to see what they've accomplished as far as those recommendations. And that'll give you a good baseline. Otherwise, when you get into an environment, if they have not conducted an assessment in a while, conduct the assessment. That's why it's so critical, because now you have better oversight as far as, all right, you're at an overall score as a 2.5, or we'll say 1.5. We're going to be able to get to a overall score of a 3.5, with some being 4s, if we use this roadmap based on our gap analysis and our recommendations. Do I have any questions based on all of that? Because I know that was a lot of information that I just provided you all.
We do have a lot of questions, Jax. You ready?
Let's go through. Yeah, let's ask some questions.
All right. This is going to be a little bit of a lightning round for you.
Let's do it. Yeah, we've got the time.
Okay, here we go.
Okay.
Chris Young, and this goes back about 10 minutes too. So you'll build the spreadsheet, copy paste from the reference into the spreadsheet. So the reference being like 853 into the spreadsheet.
You could. I probably wouldn't do a copy and paste, but I am more familiar with those controls. If that is the way that you want to do it, you could do it. But remember that your work paper, ideally is for you to be able to understand what their current environment is. Now, what you could do is right after that subcategory or wherever you want to, maybe next to the controls, the references, maybe you do a copy and paste in there. So it's easier for you to reference back and forth when you're building out the current environment and building out the interview questions, for example. It's all based on how you want to build that work paper that is going to be operational, like effective. You can use it effectively within your environment. So you can customize it how you want. What are your thoughts on internal audits, getting the company ready for Fed commercial audits, helping your company pass and less findings? So it all depends. So internal audits, I've done a couple of those. I've led a couple of those. Usually what will happen is we go in and we do an audit from somebody else's audit, and it helps them get ready for their other audit. Like we go in and we audit, and then KPMG comes in and audits our audit to get them prepared for that audit, if that makes sense. So I've been part of those. It just helps them to identify their findings and ideally either mitigate them before the other audit or just be prepared and know, like not have surprises when KPMG comes in, for example, and does the official audit. We're like the prep for it, basically. Oh man, yes, if I remember, I think for our other client, because they were just so like they had nothing in place, I'm pretty sure we gave them scores of zeros on some things because they had nothing. Nothing had been done, nothing had been established. There were some controls we just couldn't even assess, if that. So those like ones that you just can't assess because they literally have nothing, then you could do a 0 or you could do the 1. It depends, like nothing's being done, but 0 is like not only is nothing being done, but nothing's established. So it all depends. Yeah, it all depends on how you want to do the scoring. Are scopes of these assessment org wide, or can you narrow my scope? When I see information systems in the controls, I get stuck on all systems in org or only the ones I manage, just an admin for reference. They can absolutely be narrowed down. When we did it for my last client, they didn't have a ton. I think they only had, I don't know, less than 100. That's not a lot in my opinion. It's a small state and local organization. So I would say customize it and narrow it how you want to, but you're going to need to assess all of those systems organizationally wide. However you want to tackle that, you work with the client with figuring that out. If there's ones that you're not doing as part of the scope, then you're going to need to annotate that somewhere. Like it has to be, unless you like, if you don't, then you're not doing a full assessment, in my opinion. Like you really need to take the full picture. And even if it's noting that you didn't assess a certain area, a certain scope based on the client's feedback. How do you assess the goal to be score for the client? Why not only make the goal 1 higher than as is? That's such a great question. Okay, so because we actually had this conversation about our client right now. The reason you would make a higher goal is you would look at, like, I don't know if this is the right word, but potential. What is the potential of that client? Can they potentially be a 4 or a 5? Probably not a 5, but can they get one of those controls potentially to a 4? Where do they, and when I say potential, do they have the resources? Do they have the money allocation? Do they have the workforce? The client that I have now, they didn't even have a person that did cybersecurity. So getting them to a 4 would be really, really hard. Now they do have one cybersecurity person hired, and they're hiring a second one, which may be able to allow them to get to a 4, but just look at what is their potential. Can they get to those? If you don't think so, then don't put them as a 4, put them as a 3, put them 1 notch or even a half a notch higher. Our goal with the future state is just to get their maturity up, whatever that looks like.
This is the Expel worksheet, I believe.
Oh, would we be able to get a copy of this as well? Yeah, absolutely. I will just drop it in because it should be shareable in here too.
I can do it.
Okay.
I'm your Vanna White. Here.
Yeah, you guys can absolutely have that. That's why Expel gives it away. It's awesome. Has there been any thoughts about automating any of this process? If there's 108 different controls, there seems to be an opportunity. Yes, there actually are GRC platforms out there that automate this. I've seen them. I've got to do demos with them. It's amazing. It is amazing because you can literally, all that information I just put in there, what it'll do for you, and I've seen this, is like that first one I was showing you where we went to NIST 853, it'll do all of that for you. And it'll also feed you questions for the interview to ask. And then you just type what you find into the portal, and then it fills out. I'm assuming it'll probably even do scoring for you if you wanted it to. But yeah, there's definitely automated tools out there, and they're very helpful. I think Erica, you use an automated tool, don't you, for coal fire? I don't know. I wish we did, but we don't. But I will tell you, it makes you a better analyst to know how to use these work papers before using those automated tools. How do you feel about using a third-party system such as RapidFire for compiling all the data? I think it's amazing. I wish we would use it. Again, it would make my life so much easier, because what we haven't talked about is that final report. It is intense. I think our final report, and this was a very immature client that didn't have a lot of systems, and I think we were at like 60 pages, 70 pages, because it has, the XM, all the scoring, the methodology, our recommendations, the gap analysis. Like, it's these reports, hence why it takes so long to do this. If you're doing it with a team and providing it to a client, you need time to write those reports. So I think they're great. I would love to have a system that did all of that for me. As a consultant, how would you quote a small business for a full assessment when one has never been completed? Okay, when you say as a consultant, are you talking about like you're going in as an independent consultant with your LLC? I think that's the question. So I'll answer it two ways. Like, we charge a lot of money, obviously, at where my organization, because we're a big organization. We have a lot of overhead. It was like, I mean, we did an assessment for an overall contract, and I can see Erica probably would actually be really good at dropping a number in there because she works on the commercial side. Federal is a little different because it's all incorporated together. But I've seen $20,000 for assessments, all the way up to $250,000 to $500,000 for assessment. Size is dependent. What is the size of your team? What overall head costs? But if you're wanting to go in as an individual, you may consider either a baseline cost or a like hourly rate. Your hourly rate, I have seen from like $230 an hour upwards of like $500 an hour. So things to just consider if you're wanting to do this as a consultant. Jerry, you have your own business. Do you have any insights you want to provide on that, where you've gone in as a consultant and done it?
Yeah, I mean, there's small businesses are really tough because their margins are so lean, and when you're trying to charge them a practical price, they typically don't want to. I can tell you, just definitively, I did a 3 physician dermatology clinic that, probably $45 million annual revenue, with nursing staff and front of desk people, probably 45 employees. And I think I charged him $18,000, which is pretty cheap. I was there maybe on site 2 days, and then it was like a week of prep, and then 2 weeks of post and follow up and reporting, and then it was more of a risk assessment than an audit, right? So just really quickly, like, when you do audit, you audit and find the gaps, and then the next step, if you're capable, is doing the risk on what is so bad about having those gaps. Because sometimes you can have a gap in your controls and it's not a big deal. Sometimes you can have a gap in your control and it's a wicked big deal, and you need to address it immediately. So that's where the extra value add is, how you score those, and then you sort by how bad the score is, right? And then you deliver recommendations on how to resolve. So 18 grand, I feel like I undercharged them. I was trying to get the work. But just to give you perspective, fatter clients or larger organizations are going to have deeper pockets and be able to give you the resources that you need. It depends on what your goals are, though. Okay.
How long did it take you to do that assessment? So it's 18 grand over how long?
I would probably say, maybe 50 hours, 50, 60 hours. What's the math on that? I'll get a calculator
Yeah.
out. I'm just kind of curious now, because when I
Yeah.
priced it, I just did a lump sum divided by, let's say 60 hours, $300 an hour.
Yeah, it's not
So,
terrible. That's pretty good.
no, that's
Yeah.
pretty on brand.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Hopefully that answers your question, Jeffrey. All
That's
right,
awesome.
that's it for the
Yeah.
questions, Jax. Oh,
I
actually, hold on. There's a couple more coming in hot. I haven't even read this one.
Hey, do you
Uh,
know of any built-in Microsoft platforms that act as an asset management platform that can store SDLC documents for each asset? Oh, man. I don't know of any. There's gotta be some. I don't really use Microsoft, though, so
Asset management platform that can store SDLC documents.
yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot to that question, right? So
Yeah.
asset management, you do want to store hardware, software, and data. Those are the three assets that you really should be thinking about. When you say SDLC, you say documents. So I'm thinking process documents, what's your DevOps workflow, your infrastructure, your network diagrams, your development pipeline, your CI/CD pipeline, those documentation. So for me, when you say documents and asset management, I mean, I would think OneDrive, frankly, or SharePoint. Even though SharePoint's a bear and they usually turn into hot messes on fire, what you're asking, Archangel, that SharePoint is the correct answer. Apparently, BSEC is saying you can use Intune with DevOps, which is
Oh,
weird.
okay.
BSEC, if you can give a little bit more qualifier on that, because Intune, last I knew, was an MDM solution and didn't have anything to do with SDLC DevOps. But
There is a Sam's Tool partner. I don't know, Microsoft Software Inventory Analyzer, MSIA. I just did a quick search on some things. So, but there's probably, I don't know if you're looking for an OSINT, like not OSINT, but open source platform. But likely if it's Microsoft, you're going to be paying a little bit of money for that.
All right. Next question. And BSEC's going to follow up on this Intune thing. But next question. I love this question, by the way.
For the newbie, can we compare NIST CSF versus NIST RMF? Do we start with one versus the other? Does one inform the other? Ooh, I like that. So there is going to be overlap. I started with RMF and I'm trying to think because it's been so long. I started with RMF, but I can tell you what I learned from RNF, I use in CSF. So I think that you could start with either. I felt like there was still a learning curve for me when I went into CSF, but I think both are really good as far as for newbies to get into. Because when I got into, like Jerry was saying earlier, NIST 853 was absolutely overwhelming. And I don't know why we pushed that so hard from my lens of education. That was a big one that was pushed in school and it absolutely overwhelmed me. But then I took a course that was really focused on RMF and it made more sense to me. So I hope that answers your question. I think you could start with one with the other. I love CSF now only because I've actually applied it. So I have the actual experience. And now as soon as I started doing it, it all made more sense versus just like reading it, writing blogs about it. So I think either one would be good. What else? If we're doing GRC and helping audit a business, does NIST CSF give a baseline or does RMF establish a baseline as well? Both would do a baseline. Yeah. But CSF is more for establish. It's designed to help establish that baseline for organizations. You can add to that, Jerry, please.
Yeah. So, Christopher, you got to remember, like, your business might be national security, building nuclear weapons, and my business is building robots that I hope become the next big Christmas toy item, right? Two wildly different levels of security needed for both of these manufacturing companies. They're both manufacturing. We're both making something. Yours just happens to protect American citizens, and mine is trying to get paid, right? So, you can have different baselines with that. So with NIST CSF, it's a framework, meaning it's basically a security operations framework, by the way, which is why I love it so much. It's the first time a framework actually made sense to the way that InfoSec professionals actually operate their business. So with that, you say, okay, what is based on my environment, based on my data, based on my needs, what are my requirements? And that's where you look. This is something called FIPS 199 and FIPS 200 if you really want to get nerdy about it. But what you're basically doing is, what are my confidentiality requirements? What are my integrity requirements? What are my availability requirements? And that is your 3 security objectives. And based on where those sliders are, like, let's just say availability is wicked high. And then confidentiality is wicked high for you, Chris, but wicked low for me because I don't care. I'm making widgets. I don't have confidentiality requirements. So then once you do all that, then you can go to NIST CSF and say, okay, here are my controls, but then the level of maturity that I need for these controls, the level of maturity for my organization, yours might be a 4, but mine, I'm comfortable at a 2. And that's going to mean it costs less money. I can achieve my security objectives sooner and faster. It prioritizes and informs what I'm trying to do. So before you baseline, you really need to understand, like, what is it that you're trying to do? What does it matter to your business? and then you baseline based on that information, and then you assess to identify where your gaps are from your baseline, and then you get that target score like Jax was showing and start working towards that. And by the way, that spider map that she showed earlier between your current score and where your target score is, that is what you report on to business periodically, because you should be able to show a maturity, like, oh, here's where we were last time, here's where we are today, and here's where we're going. Just a fun fact for reporting on these things. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And I just pulled up NIST RMF because it's been a while. But yeah, you're spot on. I think that what I use now and what we used on our last CSS is ERM, which is very similar to RMF, Enterprise Risk Management. So we actually use that as our baseline for us to be able to prepare, identify, and understand the risks within their environment where it's at the enterprise level. So I think RMF would be good for that initial, because it's a prepare, categorize, select, implement, assess, authorize, and then monitor, and everything's monitoring. So back to that other question though, as far as CSF or RMF, I think you need to know both. And I would actually encourage you to look at NIST 8286. I'm going to drop this into chat. NIST 8286. Is it NIST? Is it IR? Yeah, I think it's IR. NIST 8286. Check that out. Enterprise Risk Management. I think it's a better. Yes, love it. Enterprise Risk Management, NIST 8286. It does similar. It's similar to RMF, but now you're taking and looking at the enterprise. So that tier 1, tier 2 level. This doesn't have a set of controls, although it can work very well with CSF, just like RMF works really well with CSF. So, okay. I think we're good. I know, Jerry, you need to drop soon. So
I do. This has been a phenomenal session. I'll let you, again, I'm not trying to appropriate. I have a terrible problem of just like bowling my way into things, especially when it comes to GRC, which is my jam.
Yeah. You're awesome. You've been doing it a lot longer than me, so I appreciate your feedback.
All right. Well, Jax, it's your workshop, so I'll let you close it out here.
Okay. Thanks, Jerry. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you, Jerry and Simply Cyber. This was amazing to be part of the Simply Cyber Con. I hope you guys learned something from this session and from the other Simply Cyber Con sessions. Honestly, you guys have been amazing. Thanks for being patient as I was having technical issues in the background. And last thing, don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have questions on this. You can find me on LinkedIn at just Jack Scott, or hit me up on Outpost Gray. I'd love to support you guys. The resources should have been shared out. If you'd like to get them again, you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. I can get them over to you. But again, thank you for the support. You guys are amazing. I love the community. That's all I've got. I'm out.
All right. Thanks, everybody. The show will be available on replay. The resources will be available to all people who were here today. If you got value, hit the like button. If you want more content like this, absolutely go over to Outpost Gray on YouTube and subscribe to her channel. Jax is pushing GRC knowledge all the time over on Outpost Gray. So definitely a good sub. You'll love it. Thanks, everybody, so much. On behalf of Simply CyberCon, we'd like to thank Jack Scott for taking the time and sharing all her experience. And thank you to all of you, you 100+ wonderful people who were here today asking great questions, sharing the love, and bettering everybody up on the GRC. So until next time, stay secure. Everybody, I hope you enjoyed that content. Keep the cybersecurity train going by connecting with the other Simply Cyber community resources. We have the Discord server that's lively and always keeps the conversation going. You can connect with me directly on LinkedIn. And also every single weekday morning on the Simply Cyber channel, we're doing live daily cyber threat briefings, 8 a.m. Eastern time, as well as Thursday at 4:30 p.m. We're doing live stream interviews with industry experts, and we produce videos that we push out every Wednesday morning. I'm Jerry from Simply